Thank you for gathering today for the brand new path to rice flour presented by J Fudo. This is a workshop to introduce you to the blooming potential of rice flour made in Japan. This workshop is organized by J Fudo, which is an international branding organization for Japanese agriculture, forestry, fishery products, including not only rice flour, but also sake, tea, wagyu, and many more. We would like to appeal the quality of rice flour that you have never come across before from Japan, the land of rice. Six rice flour corporations are cooperating with us today in this workshop. Please let us know if you would like a sample, and we will ship it to you right after this workshop. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat. And later we'll have time to discuss the impressions of using Japanese rice flour and some ideas for recipes. We are looking forward to your inspiring feedback. And today we're going to share some inspiration to expand your idea using Japanese rice flour with Sam. Sam is from Third Culture Bakery in San Francisco, a talented and also a very successful chef who has been creating original, colorful, tasty, and fun products using mochi rice flour. He's full of inspiration. Let me call him out. Sam?
Hi, Kana. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to.
Thank you for being here for us. Thank you. And you're using mochi rice flour for quite some time, but this time it was Japanese rice flour. It's slightly different. How was your impression of using it?
My impression of using the Japanese rice flour has been really, really good. Great. Because I really love the fine texture of the rice flour. Here in the States, we have a lot of rice flour available, but a lot of them are ground a little bit rough, and which is fine in a lot of bread application or a lot of wet application. But for me as a baker, I have been looking for something that's kind of very finely texture that I can use in making cakes. The smaller, the finer the texture, the more kind of luxurious the cake become. And so for me, I was very happy to experiment and use this rice flour because it did really make my cake super moist and super soft and very finely textured.
How was the texture of handling it?
Handling it, as soon as I can show you a little kind of bowl here that I'm using.
Yes.
The texture, by comparison, is almost like a cornstarch. It's so powdery and so fine, which again, it was super surprising for me when I first started working with this flour, just because I'm used to more of a coarse, sandy texture. And so the texture when I first started using it as a raw ingredient, it's super fine. But then also when I was working with the batter, you can see that the batter is very smooth, very free flowing. And it did translate into such a softer cake, which I was very happy about.
How is the taste-wise? Does it make any distinctive features that you've kind of find out?
Yeah, taste-wise, it's very mild and very sweet, which I love. For me at our bakery, we have been experimenting with a lot of gluten-free flours, and a lot of times it has such a unpleasant aftertaste in the raw stage as well as the baking stage. But for me, even tasting the raw batter, I always taste my cakes before I put it in the oven, and it has such a really lovely sweet taste, and it really highlights kind of the rice and the origin of the rice, and you can tell that it was grown very carefully, and it's just all around a great flour.
Thank you. But see, I think you're used to using rice flour in general, like mochi rice flour, and this time Japanese, regular rice flour. But I'm sure there are people who hasn't been didn't get the opportunity of using it, So do you have any advice? Maybe is it difficult to play around with, or what's your impression of using rice flour who hasn't been really not using it for their products?
Yeah, so the most exciting part about this particular product, the rice flour from Japan, just because it's super fine. It really does well in high moisture, high fat batters, such as cakes, and also for cookies. It really is going to translate into such a softer, buttery kind of textured baked products. And so you can easily just take any recipes that you like. You don't need to do a lot of modification, and just swap out equal amount of the rice flour with the wheat flour. And as long as you have enough fat or enough moisture, you're going to be in good shape.
What do you think about the like the chance or the odds of Japanese rice flour being in the States? Of, do you think it'll be a successful ingredient?
I think so. I think a lot of Americans love kind of the story behind an ingredient. And I think Japan has such a strong heritage and strong story of rice. And so even with using Mochiko rice flour, we still lead with the story of owners and the heritage. So I think having this rice organically grown in Japan, processed so beautifully at such a fine texture, people will love that. For me, it's always about the taste, and the taste will kind of speak for itself. And I think people will love it here.
And I love your T-shirt today.
Oh, thank you. It says third culture in Japanese.
That's what I saw. That's what I saw. So we're moving on to your recipe today. You're gonna share us a nice recipe. What did you come up with?
Yeah, so today I really wanted to show people how to use this Japanese rice flour and make a very light and fluffy chocolate cake, again, using rice flour. And I wanted to create a recipe that uses very basic everyday ingredients that everyone should have at home, but also something that professional can take and run with and make something creative and add, other additions as they wish. And so today we are going to make that, and it's very simple. And I hope everyone who's joining us can make it at home when they get their rice flour in the mail. So let's go through the recipes.
Please.
Yeah. Should I go ahead?
Of course, I'll turn the time over to you.
Yeah, so you should have a recipe in front of you, whoever is participating. It's my light and fluffy rice flour chocolate cake. I have the ingredients in front of me here, so we'll go through them one by one. First, you need 2 room temperature eggs. The most important part is to make sure that it is room temperature, not cold, because when all of your ingredients are room temperature, all of your things can incorporate a lot better, and you end up with having a fluffier cake. So we have 2 eggs. We have a neutral oil. I like to use avocado oil or sunflower oil. Organic cane sugar. Heavy cream. If you're vegan, you can substitute this with coconut cream as well. And then the start of the show, we have the Japanese rice flour. And I just wanted to show you the texture of this. It's just very, very fine, almost cornstarchy in flavor, which again, like I mentioned before, makes for a very, very fine cake. And then the other star of this cake, because it's a chocolate cake, is that you have to use a really good quality cocoa powder. And so today I'm using Cho Cocoa Powder, which is a Berkeley-based company. They're our neighbor, and it's packed full of flavor, full fat chocolate, and has been very minimally processed, which is gonna go great with the rice flour. And then your baking standards, you have baking powder, baking soda, and sea salt, which is gonna give flavor and also a little lift in your cake. And then we have vanilla extract and a little bit of vinegar. Now the vinegar is a little different, but what it does is actually it reacts with the baking powder when you mix it. And it gives it a little lightness and lift when it's all mixed together. And so with that, let's get started. And so you're gonna need 2 bowls. One bowl is gonna be your wet ingredients and the other is gonna be your dry. And so let me, here in your bowl, you're just gonna add 1 ingredient at a time. So we're gonna add 2 eggs. And then we're just gonna beat it up. Use a small balloon whisk. You can also do this in your hand mixer if you have one, but I prefer to do it by hand just because it's less things to clean for me. So you're beating the eggs and you want to make sure that they're kind of incorporated all together. And next ingredient that's going to go in is your sugar. Add it all in. And again, you want to mix, mix, mix. Each addition of the ingredients, you kind of mix for about 20 seconds. You're not looking for a super smooth paste at this point, but you just want to make sure that everything is kind of incorporated together. And then the next ingredient is your neutral oil. And again, I love to use avocado oil just because it has such a clean, neutral flavor that goes really well with baking. You can also use sunflower oil, which I love using. Just tidy up here. And so you're just gonna sift it. You can see here that there's, big lumps that you wanna make sure you get through the sieve. And then when you're done, just give it a little stir to mix in the baking powder and baking soda, because you don't want the baking powder to sit on your batter all at once. And so we have a dry mix here, and then we have our mix. And we're just gonna add our dry flour into the wet in 3 addition. Again, like I mentioned, rice flour tends to clump. And so you wanna make sure you add your flour 3 separate times so that you can really mix it into your mixture. And the one advantage that I love working with rice flour is that, traditionally making cakes with wheat flour, you have to be really careful with not over mixing your batter or not stirring too much, because stirring too much really develops the gluten, which can make your cakes really, really tough. But with rice flour, you don't have gluten, so you can really take your time to make sure your batters are very, very even and incorporated. Gonna mix, 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 making sure to scrape all the sides of the bowl. You don't want any dry lumps. And then the last addition, just gonna add all my flour together. And then what you want really is a very thick, almost pancake-like consistency. Like this, where it kind of looks like lava. It just flows down your bowl really nice. If it's too thin, just add a couple more tablespoons of flour. And if it's too thick, you can add a little bit more of your heavy cream. Sometimes it also depends on where you live. If you have a lot of humidity, your flour can dry really fast. But this is what the final texture you're looking for. Okay. Scrape the side, just make sure I have everything together. And so this is your final batter. It's pretty easy. And what I try to develop in the recipe is for people to have all these accessible ingredients like cacao powder and heavy cream and vinegar. So it's very easy to find. And the next thing you need to do is just grease your baking pan. You can cook this in a loaf pan, or you can cook it in a brownie pan. I have an 8 inches by 8 inches that I've greased with melted butter. And we're just gonna pour it in the pan. So just move it around until it's even, and then you can tap it 2 or 3 times to make sure big bubbles get out of your batter so that your cake will rise very evenly when you cook. And so we're gonna cook this for 30 minutes in a 350 degrees oven at home if you don't have an oven with fan. But if you're using a professional oven like me that has an automatic fan, I would recommend 300 degrees for the same time, 30 minutes. And then we are gonna rotate it for the first 15 minutes. We're just gonna switch it and rotate it and then cook another 15 minutes. Then you're gonna let it cool. And so the key thing is also, I will tell you when I show you the final product, but the key thing to baking with rice flour is that you want to underbake your cake slightly so that it retains the moisture and the fluffiness of the cake. And so make sure you don't overbake and just keep checking at the 30-minute mark and see if your cake is done. I magically have my finished product.
Of course, you're a magician.
And so you can see here, you have to rely on your senses when you bake, and it goes with wheat flour or rice flour. And so as a baker, you need to see that the edges of your cake is separated away from your cake, which is a very, very guaranteed sign that your cake is done, 95% done. And you also want to make sure that the middle is also a little sunken in, which means that there's still a lot of moisture and a lot of kind of humidity in the cake, which makes sure that the cake will be very yummy. And so the other benefits I actually forgot to mention is rice cake. The beautiful thing is that it stays fresh and stays moist for 2 to 3 days. With a lot of wheat flour, the wheat itself actually goes through a chemical transformation where it goes stale very, very fast within the first 3-4 hours. But rice, it stays hydrated for quite a long time. So if you're making cake and you're gonna serve it the next day or serve it in 2 days from now, this stays really well. But the key is just to leave it at room temperature, wrapped in plastic, and do not refrigerate, because the refrigerating rice products tends to harden it. If you think about refrigerating cooked rice, it gets really hard fast. And so just leave it at room temperature. Okay, so for the whipped cream, I really love pairing chocolate with something light, just because chocolate can be a dense flavor. So I like pairing it with something fresh, something light. And so today I'm gonna show you a very simple chantilly cream, which is cream with vanilla extract. So this recipe is also included in the page that I provided, but this is a very, very simple but very yummy whipped cream recipe that we also use in the food. So we have heavy cream here. Make sure it's very cold from the fridge. I'm using, again, organic sugar. A little bit of sea salt to balance out the sweetness, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And that is so simple. You can use this, you can whip it by hand, which takes a long time and it's a good workout, but I'm using a machine here today. And so we're just gonna whip this for around 5 to 8 minutes. I'm just gonna whip it in my machine. So you wanna make sure you whip your whipped cream to soft peak. See the texture here? I over whipped it a little bit, but it usually holds its form. So you really want to be fancy and you want to make a special treat. I like to plate my chocolate cake up, and I will show you the inside texture of that cake. It's very fluffy. There's a lot of air. You can still see the moistness of the cake, which is really, really nice. And it really comes down to the quality of the rice flour that you're using. This Japanese rice flour is very, very good quality, and the softness and the fineness of the flour really contributes to this moistness and the texture, the fineness of the texture of this cake. So we're gonna put the cake in there. I'm gonna put whipped cream. And you can put whatever you like. I like to put cocoa nibs, which is unprocessed raw chocolate, which gives a little bitterness. But if you like, you can put hazelnuts, almonds, or any kind of fruit that's in season, like strawberries or raspberry, goes really well with this. And so there you have it. That is my light and fluffy Japanese rice flour chocolate cake.
Thank you so much, Sam. Looks
course.
lovely.
We're letting Sam go, but we're currently going through a trial and error process to find a way to communicate the attractiveness of Japanese rice flour to as many people as possible. This is seriously, we are. To do so, we could really use your advice. So whoever saw this, whoever participated in this workshop today, please give us an idea, hint, feedback, whatever it can be, so that we could reach you and the audience in the US with our Japanese rice flour. In case you would like the sample, please write it on the chat, give us a contact, and we'll get back to you with the product. And oh yes, again, I will remind you guys, we'll send you the recipe which Sam wrote with the portion, like the amount of everything. And there are JFudo website, and we will inform that to you as well. And feedback survey, so that we could just, be in the right place with this Japanese rice flour. So thank you very much for attending today. Sam, thank you so much for being there.
Thank you, Kana.
Bye. Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much, and see you next time for everybody here. Thank you for being there today. So see you soon, and bye-bye.